He was raised in a big, affluent, Southern family that emphasized integrity, education, and discipline, qualities that would eventually characterize his on-screen demeanor and inner life. His mother, Lucille Crane Scott, was renowned for her elegance and gentility, while his father, George Grant Scott, was a famous textile businessman. Being the second of 7 children, Randolph's Charlotte, North Carolina, upbringing cultivated a sense of calm, self-assurance, and moral rectitude that would later play a key role in his movie persona. He received his early education at private schools before attending Georgia Institute of Technology and the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. At first, he intended to pursue a career in business or engineering, just like his father, but Hollywood and fate had other ideas. Scott didn't become famous right away. He returned to civilian life with a fresh feeling of purpose after serving as an artillery officer in France. During World War I with distinction, he was enthralled with the burgeoning film business in California on his visit there in the early 1920s. A number of casting directors were drawn to him because of his tall, athletic frame, remarkable features, and Southern charm. Before securing modest speaking parts, he started his acting career as an extra and stuntman. His early endeavors were distinguished from those of many of his peers by his tenacity and humility. After landing a solid job in Hollywood by the late 1920s, he quickly made the switch to talking pictures, where his rich, booming voice made him stand out. The 1930s and 1940s saw Randolph Scott's career take off. He made appearances in comedies, dramas, and other genres. He became a legend, however, thanks to westerns like The Last of the Mohicans, 1936, Western Union, 1941, and The Desperado, 1943. Being stoic, honorable, and unwavering in the face of hardship, Scott came to represent the archetypal Western hero. His characters reflected his own behavior in real life and exhibited a moral code based on courage and decency. Scott stayed clear of the dangers of celebrity excess. In contrast to many of his contemporaries, he was renowned for his quiet manner, professionalism, and unwavering commitment to his work. During the 1950s, he worked with director Bud Bodker to produce some of the best westerns ever, such as Comanche Station 1960, Ride Lonesome 1959, and 7 Men from Now 1956. These now classic movies showed Scott as a man of action, driven by an unwavering moral compass yet plagued by regrets from the past. Scott's impact went well beyond his last motion picture role in Sam Peckinpah's 1962, Ride the High Country. He played an elderly police officer in that movie who was fighting to enforce his morals in a world that was changing, a portrayal that reflected his own smooth departure from Hollywood. He chose to leave the screen on his own terms and retired at the height of his dignity. He became one of the wealthiest actors of his time by making prudent real estate and business investments. Nevertheless, he maintained his modesty, groundedness, and devotion to his family and faith in spite of his financial success. Throughout his life, Randolph Scott was married twice, and each marriage showed distinct aspects of his personality. One characterized by peaceful household bliss and the other by high society. Heiress Marion DuPont, whose family name had great significance in American business and social circles, was the lady he married for the first time in 1936. Marion was the great-granddaughter of Eleuthérine DuPont de Nemours, a French-born chemist and businesswoman who established one of the most significant industrial conglomerates in American history, and the daughter of William DuPont Sr., a member of the affluent and powerful DuPont dynasty. Scott's impoverished childhood in North Carolina was drastically different from the world of inherited riches and old money privilege that he entered through this marriage. Marion DuPont was a remarkable and successful woman who was not just an eyes but also a self-reliant, independent equestrian who had a strong love for horse racing and breeding. She was the owner of Montpelier, a historic Virginia mansion that had formerly housed President James Madison, and she turned it into a top-notch center for horse breeding and training. It's interesting to note that Randolph Scott was the best man at Marion's wedding to Virginia sportsman George Somerville before to her marriage to Scott. Odd kinship gave their subsequent relationship a unique twist, implying that their friendship evolved into romance gradually and possibly unanticipatedly. Nevertheless, Scott and Marion DuPont's marriage was doomed to fail, despite the glitz that's surrounding their union. Despite their shared privilege, their worlds couldn't be more dissimilar. Scott, a rising Hollywood star at the time, was concentrated on advancing his acting career in California, while Marion was firmly anchored in her East Coast social customs and equestrian interests. The couple frequently found themselves living apart due to differences in lifestyle and geography. Their marriage terminated in divorce in 1939, only 3 years after they were married. The split was said to have been amicable even if the union did not result in any children. It's interesting to note that Marion DuPont Scott retained his last name for almost 50 years until her passing in 1983, using it for the remainder of her life. This everlasting decision may have been the result of a lasting affection or respect between the two, or it may have been her wish to keep a name that had come to characterize a public persona in the philanthropic and horse racing communities. Following a number of years of singledom, Randolph Scott's second marriage brought him enduring contentment. He married Patricia Stillman, a stunning actress who was 21 years his junior. In 1944, Patricia had made a few cameos in movies in the early 1940s, but she focused mostly on raising her family after becoming married to Scott. Compared to Scott's previous, more socially calculated union with Marion DuPont, their connection was a sharp contrast. This time, the marriage appeared to be based on sincere love and common principles. The pair avoided most of the Hollywood attention that so frequently dominated famous marriages of the time and instead established a stable and long-lasting home life. Randolph and Patricia added 2 children to their household through adoption in 1950, a boy named Christopher and a daughter named Sandra. According to all accounts, Scott was a loving and kind father who had established his reputation as a tough and unyielding Western hero. Friends and co-workers frequently remarked on how loving his home life was and how close he was to his wife and kids. In contrast to many of his peers, Scott was able to keep his marriage steady and free from controversy or public unrest, and his home life served as a pillar of his subsequent contentment. One of Hollywood's more understated success stories, Randolph and Patricia's marriage lasted for 40 years. Until his passing in 1987, the Scotts led a tranquil existence away from the bright lights of the movie business, alternating between their Beverly Hills house and their ranch close to Santa Barbara, where Randolph could indulge his passion for horses and the wide countryside, which he had had since he was a child. Scott was able to find the security and tranquility that had escaped him in his first marriage, thanks to this long-lasting partnership, a peaceful home life that reflected the resilient, strong characters he frequently played on cinema. Few people were as prominent in the Hollywood Western industry as John Wayne and Randolph Scott on television. They each represented an own form of heroism and were towering representations of tough masculinity. However, their relationship was everything but cordial behind the scenes. Fans frequently believed that 2 performers who were so similar would admire one another, but the reality was much more nuanced. The elegant Southern gentleman Randolph Scott, who had a modest sense of dignity and perfect manners, had a strong and enduring distaste for John Wayne. Their disagreements extended beyond their rivalry on the job. They were based on each man's character, ideals, and perspective on the cowboy code and acting craft. Scott once stated rather plainly, "I never cared for the man. He stood for everything in Hollywood that I didn't find admirable." On and off screen, Scott had always taken pride in his ability to exercise restraint. His performances were thoughtful, measured, and subtly impactful. He could communicate strength without yelling or stomping. Conversely, John Wayne was the epitome of bluster, gregarious, loud, and commanded attention everywhere he went. Scott said, "Wayne was a showman. I was also an artisan." For Scott, there is a distinction. Wayne's heroics came out as theatrical, bordering on excessive. He believed that Wayne was the result of Hollywood mythology rather than the methodical storytelling that Scott admired. Beyond the Duke's refined exterior, Scott observed what he described as a salesman's interpretation of the West, more concerned with appearance than honesty. Although they never directly competed on screen, their career paths occasionally intersected. Nonetheless, there was no denying the underlying spirit of rivalry. During the 1940s and 1950s, both were popular Western characters, and producers frequently contrasted their box office performance. Scott recalled that the studios attempted to set us against one another. In actuality, though we never required comparison, we were engaged in 2 distinct games. While Wayne's films thrived on spectacle and patriotism, Scott's pictures frequently possessed a moral nuance, a feeling of inward struggle and introspection. Scott thought that strategy was superficial. He claimed that I portrayed men who questioned their decisions. Wayne portrayed men who never asked questions. Their personalities clashed in addition to their artistic disputes. Scott was renowned for his cool, collected manner. He seldom ever spoke up or brags about his accomplishments. Wayne, on the other hand, was gregarious and politically vocal, frequently taking over discussions with his blustery confidence and conservative viewpoints. He enjoyed discussing politics and war, 2 things I never believed should be glorified in a saloon or on a soundstage, Scott once said. Scott, who felt that life, like the frontier, was full of gray areas, it was greatly disturbed by Wayne's self-assured patriotism, which was frequently articulated in black and white moral terms. Any meeting between them frequently ended in tense silence or scathing comments because of their divergent temperaments. The divide was further exacerbated by personal slights. Wayne's casual remarks on Scott's acting approach are said to have offended him on multiple occasions. Known for being direct, Wayne once said that Scott was too attractive to portray a true cowboy. That insult stayed with Scott forever. He believed that his loudness made him genuine. "I thought being real meant being quiet." Scott subsequently remarked, even in Hollywood, people were aware that if Wayne showed up at a party, Scott would graciously leave. Actors like Joel McCrea and Gary Cooper, who were mutual pals, were frequently caught in the middle, cautious not to give one guy credit in front of the other. However, Scott's distaste may have sprung most deeply from what he saw as hypocrisy. Many in Hollywood secretly despised Wayne's decision to forego military service during World War II. Despite his portrayal as a daring hero on cinema, Scott, who had a lifetime admiration for soldiers and supported the war effort in other ways, considered this to be a moral failing. Scott remarked, "I didn't condemn men who stayed at home. However, I couldn't stand people who refused to serve in a war but then acted like they were fighting one on screen." That inconsistency, in Scott's opinion, characterized Wayne's personality, a man who cares more about appearances than values. Even though he didn't like Wayne, Scott never publicly attacked him or tried to damage his reputation. His contempt was personal and finally came to light in late life. Frank interviews, "I appreciated his accomplishments," Scott acknowledged. "However, I never held the man in high regard." After the 1950s, the two Western icons stayed professional and hardly ever crossed paths. However, their quiet conflict became a part of Hollywood legend. Despite their differences, both men made significant contributions to the development of the Western genre. Wayne via larger-than-life heroism, Scott by quiet dignity and moral subtlety. Ironically, the genre might have remained balanced because of its contrast. Randolph Scott still harbored a strong and enduring contempt for him, but no love or friendship. "The last man I'd ride the range with was John Wayne," he famously declared with a chilly finality. In 1987, Randolph Scott passed away in Beverly Hills, California, at the age of 89 from heart and lung conditions. He was laid to rest at Charlotte, North Carolina's Elmwood Cemetery. He had been married to Patricia for 43 years. She passed away in 2004 and is buried beside her spouse. In 2008, their mid-century modern house was demolished,